Captain Jake Reeves wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his cargo ship into Docking Bay 17. The Crimson Nexus space station stretched out before him like a massive metal flower, its red lights pulsing in the darkness of space. He had been hauling cargo for 3 years now, and this was supposed to be just another routine stop. Fuel up, grab some cheap station food, and get back on the route to the outer colonies. He had no idea how wrong he was. The docking fees were higher than usual, and the station attendant, a nervous six-armed alien, kept glancing over his shoulder. Jake noticed that the entire commerce district was decorated with dark red banners and strange glowing symbols. Security drones floated everywhere, more than he had ever seen before. "What's going on?" Jake asked as he paid the docking fee. The attendant's voice shook. "The Grand Convergence. You should leave. Quickly." "The what?" But the attendant had already scurried away, leaving Jake standing alone in the busy terminal. He shrugged and headed toward the fuel depot. Whatever fancy party was happening here, it had nothing to do with him. He was just a human cargo hauler trying to make a living on the edges of civilized space. The fuel depot was crowded with ships of all sizes. Jake got in line behind a tall, green-skinned merchant who smelled like sulfur. He was running the numbers in his head, trying to figure out if he could afford the premium fuel, or if he would have to settle for the cheap stuff that made his engines rattle, when everything went silent. The crowd parted like water. A woman walked into the commerce district, and Jake's first thought was that she was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with pale skin that seemed to glow under the station lights. Her hair was long and black, flowing behind her like liquid shadow. She wore armor made of dark metal that looked both ancient and advanced at the same time. Her eyes were the color of blood. Behind her walked a dozen guards in similar armor, their hands on weapons that hummed with energy. Every alien in the district dropped to their knees, or pressed themselves against the walls. The six-armed attendant from earlier was flat on the ground, trembling. Jake, who had no idea what was happening, just stood there, holding his payment chip. The woman's eyes swept across the crowd, and then they stopped, on him. She moved forward with impossible grace, her boots making no sound on the metal floor. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Jake felt like a mouse being watched by a hawk. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, but his legs would not move. She stopped 3 feet in front of him. Up close, Jake could see that her skin was not just pale, but almost translucent, with dark veins visible beneath the surface. Her eyes were not just red, but glowing, with an inner light that made him feel dizzy. She was looking at him like he was the only person in the entire station. Then she raised one long finger and pointed directly at his chest. "This one," she said, in a voice that sounded like music and thunder at the same time. "He is mine. He is my husband according to the ancient laws. I claim him before all witnesses." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The entire district erupted in shocked whispers. The guards behind the woman moved forward, surrounding Jake. One of them, an older male with scars across his pale face, spoke in a language Jake did not understand. The woman responded sharply, and the guard bowed his head. "There must be some mistake," Jake said, finding his voice. "I don't even know you." The woman tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "I am Princess Valith Drathnara, heir to the Crimson Throne of the Sanguine Dominion. I have conducted the blood recognition, and you are my chosen mate. This is not a mistake." "The what recognition?" "You will understand in time. For now, you will come with me." Jake took a step back. "Look, Princess, I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm just a cargo hauler. I'm nobody special." Valith's eyes flashed brighter. "You do not understand. I am not asking. Under the laws of the Dominion, when a royal claims a mate through blood recognition, refusal is not permitted. And what if I refuse anyway? The scarred guard stepped forward. Then you will be executed for the insult to the royal bloodline. He looked around at the crowd, hoping someone would help him. But every alien was looking away. The six-armed attendant was still flat on the ground, shaking. No one was going to help a random human against a vampire princess. Because that was what she was, Jake realized with growing horror. He had heard stories about the Sanguine Dominion, whispered tales from traders who had traveled to the deep regions of space. An empire of blood-drinking psychics who ruled 17 star systems with absolute power. They were supposed to be legends, nightmares to scare new pilots. But here was their princess, pointing at him and calling him her husband. I need time to think, Jake said desperately. Valeth's expression did not change. You may think aboard my ship. Guards, escort my betrothed to the flagship. Secure his vessel. He will not be needing it for some time. Wait, you can't just take my ship. I can do anything I wish, Valeth said simply. I am the heir to the Crimson Throne. Your ship, your possessions, your very life, all of it is now mine by right of the ancient laws. Two guards grabbed Jake by the arms. He tried to pull away, but their grip was like iron. They lifted him off his feet, as easily as he might lift a child. This is kidnapping, Jake shouted. Valeth walked closer to him, so close he could feel cold, radiating from her skin. She reached out and touched his face with one finger. Her skin was ice cold, but her touch was surprisingly gentle. This is destiny, she said softly. You will come to understand, human. I have waited 300 years for the blood recognition to guide me to my perfect match. I will not lose you now that I have found you. 300 years? Jake felt his mind struggling to process that information. She was 300 years old? The guards carried him through the station, while Valeth walked ahead of them. Aliens pressed themselves against walls to let them pass. Some looked curious. Others looked horrified. One small alien child pointed at Jake and said something to its parent, who quickly covered the child's eyes. They reached a docking bay where a massive ship waited. It was not like any ship Jake had ever seen. It was built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light, with red energy conduits running along its surface like veins. It was beautiful and terrifying, just like the princess who owned it. As they brought him aboard, Jake took one last look at the station, at his ship sitting in the distant docking bay, at the life he had known just an hour ago. Then the airlock closed, and everything changed. The interior of Valeth's ship was like walking through a palace made of shadows and red light. The walls were smooth black metal, and crystals embedded in the ceiling cast a crimson glow over everything. The guards led Jake through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past rooms filled with technology he could not begin to understand. They brought him to a large chamber with a massive bed covered in dark silk, shelves full of strange objects, and a window that showed the stars outside. It was more luxury than Jake had ever seen in his life. The guards pushed him inside and closed the door. He heard it lock from the outside. Jake tried the door, knowing it was pointless. Then he went to the window and looked out at the Crimson Nexus station, already looking small as the ship moved away. His own little cargo hauler was probably already locked down, worthless without him there to fly it. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. How had his life gone so wrong so fast? Hours passed. Jake explored the room, finding a bathroom with a shower that used sonic waves instead of water, and a closet full of clothes that were far too big for him. Everything in the room was built for someone taller, stronger, and definitely not human. Finally, the door opened. Valeth entered, followed by an older vampire male with cold eyes and a permanent sneer on his face. The male looked at Jake like he was a particularly disgusting insect. "This is Lord Kyrith, my chief advisor," Valeth said. He will explain the situation to you, while I attend to other matters. I would rather you explained it, Jake said. Vayleth's eyes flashed. You do not make demands of me, human. She left, and Jake was alone with Lord Kyrith. The advisor circled him slowly, studying him from every angle. Do you know what you are to us, human? Kyrith asked. A huge mistake? Cattle. Food. Your entire species exists at our pleasure. We conquered your colonies centuries ago. We allow you to live because occasionally you prove useful. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. If we are so worthless, why does your princess want to marry me? Kyrith's expression darkened. Because our species is dying, and she is a fool who believes the old prophecies. He moved to a panel on the wall and brought up a holographic display. Images of vampires appeared, but these vampires looked sick. Their skin was gray, their eyes dull, some were twisted and deformed. We are the Sanguine Dominion, Kyrith continued. We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We are superior to every other species in strength, intelligence, and longevity. But we have one weakness. Our bloodline has grown weak. We have married among ourselves for so long that our children are born fragile. Many die young. We are becoming extinct. Jake looked at the images. And you think I can help with that? Not just you. Humans in general. Your DNA is disgustingly primitive and chaotic, but it is also highly compatible with our biology. We have tested thousands of species. Only humans produce the right chemical reactions in our blood. Only human genetic material can strengthen our bloodline. So you have been kidnapping humans? Kyrith waved his hand dismissively. We take what we need. Most humans die in the process. Their blood is useful, but their bodies cannot survive the conversion attempt. However, the blood recognition is different. When a vampire of royal blood performs the ritual, they can sense a human who is perfectly compatible. That human can not only survive bonding with a vampire, but can produce hybrid offspring with incredible power. And Vayleth thinks I am this perfect match? She does not think it. She knows it. The blood recognition does not lie. Your blood called to her from across the station. She could smell your genetic compatibility, like a flower smells to a bee. It drove her to claim you immediately, as the ancient laws require. Jake felt sick. This is insane. I am not going to just accept being used as a breeding stud. Kyrith smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You have no choice. The wedding ceremony will happen in 7 days. You will bond with the princess, and you will give her children. If you refuse, you will be executed. If you try to escape, you will be executed. If you displease her in any way, you will be executed. Do you understand? Perfectly, Jake said through clenched teeth. Kyrith left, and Jake was alone again. He paced the room like a caged animal, his mind racing. There had to be a way out of this. He could try to escape, but where would he go? They were on a ship in deep space. He could try to fight, but he had seen how strong the guards were. He could try to reason with Vayleth, but she seemed to think she owned him already. Days passed in a blur. Servants brought him food that was strange but edible. They brought him clothes that fit better, clearly made specially for him. They treated him with careful respect, as if he were made of glass. But they would not answer his questions, and they would not let him leave the room. On the 3rd day, Vayleth came to see him. She was alone this time, wearing a simpler outfit that made her look less like a warrior and more like a person. She sat in a chair across from him and studied his face. You are angry, she said. Of course I am angry. You kidnapped me. I claimed you. There is a difference. Not from where I am sitting. Vayleth was quiet for a moment. I understand this is difficult for you. Your lifespan is so short, that you do not understand the weight of destiny. But I have lived for 317 years. I have waited my entire life for the blood recognition to guide me to my true mate. When I saw you, everything became clear. You are mine, and I am yours. This is simply the way things are meant to be. Jake leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If our positions were reversed, if I pointed at you and said you belong to me now, would you accept it? Valeth's eyes narrowed. That is different. I am royalty. No, it is not different. You are treating me like an object, not a person. I have a life. I have dreams. I have choices, or at least I did, before you decided I was your destiny. For the first time, Valeth looked uncertain. Among my people, royal claims are absolute. It has always been this way. Well, among my people, slavery is wrong. It has not always been this way, but we learned. We changed. Valeth stood abruptly. You dare compare your situation to slavery? You will be the husband of a princess. You will live in luxury. Your children will be among the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And I will have no freedom, no choice, no say in my own life. Valeth's hands clenched into fists. Jake could see her struggling with something internal. Finally, she spoke quietly. I could force you. I have the power and the right. But I find that I do not wish to. I do not understand why. Maybe because you know it would be wrong. She looked at him with those glowing red eyes, and for just a moment, Jake saw something in them that was not cold or cruel. It was confusion, maybe even a little bit of fear. I will return tomorrow, Valeth said. We will speak more. She left, and Jake sat back, his heart pounding. He had seen a crack in her armor, a moment of doubt. It was not much, but it was something. If he could make her see him as a person instead of a destiny, maybe he could change his fate. Valeth did return the next day, and the day after that. Each time they talked. At first, their conversations were tense and formal, but slowly, something began to change. Jake told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests that he had not seen since he was a child. He told her about human music, how it could make you feel joy or sadness or hope. He told her about his parents, who had died in a colony accident when he was young, and how he became a cargo hauler to feel close to them. Valeth listened, and Jake could see her fascination growing. She asked questions about things that seemed simple to him, but were clearly strange to her. Why did humans laugh? Why did they cry? Why did they create art when it served no survival purpose? Because it makes life worth living, Jake explained. We do not just survive. We live. We feel things deeply. Maybe that is why we are so chaotic and emotional. But it is also why we keep going even when things are hard. Valeth stared at him for a long time. My people do not laugh anymore. We stopped feeling joy centuries ago. We exist, we rule, we survive. But we do not live as you describe it. Jake felt a strange pity for her. That sounds lonely. It is all I have ever known. On the 5th day, Valeth brought him to her private library. The room was enormous, filled with data crystals and ancient books from 100 different worlds. She showed him the history of her people, their rise to power, their conquests, and their slow decline. Jake learned that the Sanguine Dominion had once been explorers and artists, creators of beautiful things. But as they grew more powerful, they became obsessed with control and order. They engineered their own genetics, trying to create the perfect vampire. Instead, they created a dying species that could no longer adapt or change. We thought we could master biology, Valeth said quietly. We thought we were superior to the chaos of natural evolution. But nature does not care about our arrogance. It simply is. Jake pulled up a file that caught his attention. It was a military report about human colonies. According to the data, the Dominion had tried to conquer human space 12 times in the past 200 years. Every single attempt had failed. "Why do you keep losing to humans?" Jake asked. "You are stronger, smarter, more advanced." Veylet's jaw tightened. "Read the reports. You will see." Jake read through the battle logs. What he found was fascinating and a little bit horrifying. In every battle, human forces were outnumbered and outgunned. They should have surrendered. Instead, they fought with desperate creativity. They used tactics that made no logical sense. They sacrificed themselves for strangers. They refused to follow the expected patterns of warfare. In one battle, a single human ship had rammed a Dominion dreadnought at full speed, destroying both vessels, just to buy time for civilian transports to escape. In another, human soldiers had continued fighting for 3 days without food or sleep, using improvised weapons when their real ones broke. "You fight like you have nothing to lose," Veylet said. "Even when victory is impossible, you do not give up. It is illogical and wasteful and absolutely terrifying." Jake felt a surge of pride. "We fight for things you do not understand. Hope, freedom, love. Those things are worth dying for. Are they worth living for?" The question caught Jake off guard. He looked at Veylet and saw something new in her eyes. She was not just curious anymore. She was searching for something. "They are the only things worth living for." That night, Veylet invited him to dinner in her formal dining hall. It was a massive room with a long table, and to Jake's surprise, there were other vampires there. A dozen noble lords and ladies, all dressed in fancy clothing, all watching him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Lord Kyrith was there, his expression even more hostile than usual. He sat at Veylet's right hand, whispering to her in their language. Jake caught enough words to understand that Kyrith was trying to turn her against him. The dinner was awkward. The vampires ate strange foods that smelled metallic and wrong. They drank dark red liquid from crystal glasses that Jake tried very hard not to think about. They talked about politics and war and economics, using terms and references that meant nothing to him. Finally, one of the lords, a fat vampire with small eyes, looked directly at Jake. "What makes you worthy of our princess? You are weak, short-lived, and primitive. What could you possibly offer the Crimson Throne?" The table went silent. Everyone was watching him. Veylet's expression was unreadable. Jake could have stayed quiet. He could have made himself small and tried not to cause problems. But something in him refused to bow. "You are right," Jake said clearly. "I am weak compared to you. I will die long before any of you. My people have only been in space for a few hundred years, while yours have ruled the stars for 10,000. But I have something you do not have." "And what is that?" the fat lord sneered. "A future," Jake replied. The room erupted in angry whispers. Lord Kyrith stood up, his face twisted with rage. "How dare you insult us?" Jake stood as well, meeting Kyrith's eyes without fear. "I am not insulting you. I am telling you the truth. You are the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and you are dying. All of your strength and intelligence could not save you from your own pride. You tried to control everything, and now you have nothing left to control but each other." "Silence," Kyrith roared. But Jake continued. "You need humans, not just because our blood is compatible. You need us because we represent everything you have lost. We are chaotic and emotional and unpredictable. We make mistakes and learn from them. We fail and get back up. We are alive in a way you have forgotten how to be." Veylet raised her hand, and the room fell silent. She looked at Jake with an expression he could not read. "You speak boldly for someone with no power. I speak the truth. You can kill me for it if you want, but killing me will not change what I said." For a long moment, Nobody moved. Then Valeth smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Jake admitted. Valeth laughed, and the sound was like silver bells. Jake realized it might have been the first time she had laughed in years. Around the table, the other vampires looked shocked. Lord Kyrith looked furious. "I like you, Jake Reeves," Valeth said. "You do not behave like prey. You behave like an equal." "That is because I am an equal," Jake said. "Not in strength or age or power, but in value, in dignity, in the right to make my own choices." Valeth's smile faded. "And if I gave you a choice? If I asked instead of commanded? What would you choose?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. The truth was, he had been thinking about this for days. Valeth was terrifying, yes, but she was also fascinating. She was trying to understand things that her entire culture had taught her to ignore. She was changing, right in front of him. "I would choose to stay, not as your property, not as your destiny, but as your partner. If you can treat me like a person, I will help you save your people. I will negotiate with human colonies. I will help you find a better way forward, but I will not be a slave." Valeth stood and walked to him. She was so much taller that he had to look up to meet her eyes. She reached out and took his hand in hers. Her skin was cold, but her grip was gentle. "Then let us make a new agreement," she said. "A partnership, as you say. I will treat you with respect, and you will help me save my people. Together." "Together," Jake agreed. Lord Kyrith slammed his fist on the table. "This is madness. You cannot negotiate with cattle." Valeth turned to him, and her eyes blazed with power. "I am the heir to the Crimson Throne. I will negotiate with whomever I choose. If you disagree, you may challenge me for my position. Do you wish to challenge me, Lord Kyrith?" He sat down slowly. "No, my princess." "Good. Then this discussion is over." As Jake left the dining hall with Valeth, he felt like he had just won a battle without throwing a single punch. It was a small victory, but it was his. And for the first time since being pointed at in that station, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. The next 2 days passed in an uneasy peace. Valeth gave Jake access to the ship's databases and allowed him to move freely around certain sections. He spent hours reading about vampire culture and human-dominion relations, trying to understand the situation he was in. What he learned worried him. The Dominion had dozens of human colonies under their control, and the people there lived in fear. Humans were second-class citizens at best, food sources at worst. If he was going to make a real difference, he needed Valeth to change policies that had been in place for centuries. He was working on a proposal in his room when alarms started blaring throughout the ship. The door burst open, and 2 guards rushed in. "Come with us," one of them said. "Quickly." "What is happening?" "The ship is under attack. Lord Kyrith has betrayed the princess." Jake's blood ran cold. He followed the guards through corridors filled with smoke and flashing red lights. He could hear weapons firing and people shouting in the distance. They brought him to a secure chamber deep in the ship, where Valeth was standing over a tactical display, her face grim. "Kyrith poisoned 3 of the Elder Council during last night's meeting," she said, without looking up. "He blamed you for it. Half the crew believes him. He has seized control of 3 decks and is moving to take the bridge. What can I do?" Now Valeth looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that shocked him. Uncertainty. Fear. "I do not know. I am a warrior. I know how to fight in open battle. But this is betrayal from within. Kyrith knows all of my strategies. He trained many of these soldiers himself. If I fight him directly, it will tear the ship apart and kill hundreds of my people." Jake moved to the tactical display and studied it. The ship's layout showed red zones where Kyrith's forces controlled territory, and blue zones, still loyal to Valith. They were roughly equal in numbers, but Kyrith had better positioning. "Can you ask for help from other ships?" Jake asked. "We are 3 days from the nearest Dominion outpost. By the time help arrives, this will be over." Jake thought hard, his mind racing through every military history book he had ever read. The vampires fought with honor and tradition. They had formal combat doctrines that went back thousands of years. That was their weakness. "I have an idea," Jake said, "but you are not going to like it." "Tell me." "We fight dirty. We break all of your rules. We use tactics that Kyrith would never expect because they are dishonorable." Valith's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Over the next hour, Jake outlined a plan that made every vampire in the room uncomfortable. False retreats, ambushes, psychological warfare, feints, and misdirection. Everything that went against traditional Dominion military doctrine. "This is cowardly," one of the guards said in disgust. "This is survival," Jake shot back. "You can die with honor, or you can live by being smart. Your choice." Valith was silent for a long moment, then she nodded. "We do it Jake's way. Prepare the forces." The battle that followed was like nothing the vampires had ever experienced. Jake organized small teams to hit Kyrith's forces from unexpected angles, then retreat before they could respond. He had them sabotage environmental controls to fill corridors with smoke, making it hard for Kyrith's superior numbers to maneuver. He even had them use the ship's announcement system to broadcast false orders, creating confusion and mistrust among Kyrith's forces. Kyrith's soldiers, trained in traditional combat, were completely unprepared for this kind of warfare. They kept expecting honor duels and formal battles. Instead, they got chaos. Jake stayed in the command center, coordinating the teams while Valith led her forces in the actual fighting. He watched her through security cameras, moving through the corridors like a dark angel, her blade cutting through enemies with terrible efficiency. She was beautiful and terrifying, and Jake found himself unable to look away. But even with their new tactics, they were still outnumbered. Kyrith's forces were pushing toward the command center, and Jake knew they could not hold forever. That was when Jake made a decision that would change everything. "I need to go to the environmental control room," he told the guards. "That is in enemy territory. You will be killed. Maybe, or maybe I can end this." Before anyone could stop him, Jake grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and ran. He knew the ship's layout now, and he knew a maintenance passage that would take him where he needed to go. The passage was dark and narrow, but Jake squeezed through it, his heart pounding. He could hear fighting in the distance, the sound of weapons and screams. He reached the environmental control room and found it guarded by 2 of Kyrith's soldiers. They saw him and smiled, thinking he was easy prey. They were wrong. Jake had spent 3 years as a cargo hauler in dangerous space. He had been in bar fights and station riots. He was not a warrior like them, but he knew how to survive. He dodged the first soldier's attack and used the vampire's own momentum to throw him into a wall. The second soldier grabbed him, but Jake had come prepared. He had brought a small blade, and he used it to cut himself on the arm, deep enough to bleed heavily. The smell of his blood hit the vampires like a drug. Their eyes went wide, and their careful discipline crumbled. They lunged for him, fighting each other to get to the blood. Jake ran into the environmental control room and locked the door behind him. He could hear the vampires outside, clawing at the door, driven mad by the scent of his blood. Jake's vision was getting fuzzy from blood loss, but he forced himself to focus. He found the controls and did something risky. He opened the air vents and let his blood drip into the circulation system. Within minutes, the scent of human blood was flowing through the entire ship. The effect was immediate and devastating. Kyrith's forces, already stressed from the unusual combat tactics, lost all control when they smelled Jake's blood. They broke formation and started fighting among themselves, desperate to find the source of the scent. Kyrith tried to maintain order, but it was too late. The feeding frenzy had begun. Valith, who had been warned by Jake's message, had prepared her own forces. They wore masks that filtered out the scent and moved through the chaos like ghosts, taking down the confused and distracted enemies. Jake, meanwhile, was getting weaker. He had lost a lot of blood, and the room was starting to spin. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor, pressing his hand against the wound to try to stop the bleeding. The door burst open. For a moment, Jake thought it was enemy soldiers, and he tried to stand, to fight. But it was Valith. She was covered in dark blood that was not her own, and her eyes were wild. "You foolish, brave, impossible human," she said, kneeling beside him. She pulled medical supplies from her belt and started wrapping his wound. "You could have died. Had to do something," Jake said weakly. "Is it working? Kyrith's forces are in complete disarray. My soldiers are taking back the ship. But you are hurt." "Worth it," Jake said. Valith finished wrapping his wound, and then did something that shocked him. She pulled him into her arms and held him close. Her body was cold, but the gesture was warm. "You gave your blood for my people," she said softly. "Not because I commanded it. Not because you had to. Because you chose to. I do not understand you, Jake Reeves." "Good," Jake said, feeling consciousness slipping away. "I would be boring as you understood everything." The last thing he remembered before passing out was Valith's laugh, echoing through the ruined control room. Jake woke up in a medical bay, surrounded by machines that hummed and beeped softly. His arm was bandaged, and he felt weak but alive. Valith was sitting beside his bed, watching him with those glowing red eyes. "You have been unconscious for 2 days," she said. "The medical staff said you lost too much blood. They had to give you a transfusion from our emergency human supply." "Did we win?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. "Yes, Kyrith is dead. I challenged him to single combat after his forces surrendered, and I killed him myself. The ship is secure, but many died in the fighting, both on my side and his." Jake closed his eyes. "I am sorry." "Do not be. Kyrith chose betrayal. You chose sacrifice. There is a difference." Valith reached out and took his hand. "You asked me once if I would accept it if you pointed at me and declared that I belonged to you. I told you it was different because I am royalty. I was wrong." Jake opened his eyes and looked at her. "You do not belong to me," Valith continued, and her voice was filled with emotion Jake had never heard from her before. "You never did. I see that now. I claimed you because I was taught that power gives me the right to take what I want. But true strength is not in taking, it is in choosing. And I choose you, Jake Reeves, not because destiny says I must, but because I want to." Jake felt tears in his eyes. "I choose you too," he said, "not because you are a princess, not because I am afraid of dying, but because you are trying to be better than what your culture taught you to be. And that is the bravest thing I have ever seen." Valith leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. It was the most intimate gesture Jake had ever seen from her. "The wedding is in 3 days," she said, "if you still want it. But it will not be the ceremony I originally planned. I do not want a ritual of possession. I want a partnership. I want, what did you call it? A marriage based on consent and respect. I want that too." Over the next 3 days, Jake and Valith worked together to create something new. They wrote wedding vows that were nothing like traditional Dominion ceremonies. They planned a celebration that included not just vampire traditions, but human ones as well. And they drafted a document that would change the relationship between humans and the Dominion forever. The wedding took place in the main hall of the ship, with hundreds of vampires in attendance. Many of them looked skeptical or outright hostile. But Valith stood at the front of the room, wearing armor that was both beautiful and strong, and she did not care what they thought. Jake stood beside her in simple clothes that he had chosen himself. He was not trying to look like a vampire, or pretend to be something he was not. He was just Jake, a cargo hauler who had somehow ended up marrying a princess. The ceremony was officiated by one of the surviving Elder Council members, an ancient vampire woman who looked like she had seen everything the universe had to offer. She spoke the traditional words, but then Valeth interrupted her. "I wish to add something," Valeth said. She turned to face Jake and took both of his hands in hers. "Jake Reeves, I am not taking you as my possession. I am choosing you as my partner. I promise to respect your choices, to value your opinions, and to treat you as my equal. I promise to change the laws that have oppressed your people, and to work toward a future where humans and vampires can coexist with dignity. I promise to love you, not because destiny demands it, but because you have shown me what it means to truly live." There were gasps from the crowd. No vampire royalty had ever spoken such vows before. "Valeth Drathnara, I choose you as my partner. I promise to help your people find a new path forward. I promise to be honest with you, even when the truth is difficult. I promise to laugh with you, to challenge you, and to stand by your side no matter what comes. I promise to love you, not because you are a princess, but because you have the courage to change." The ancient officiant looked between them and smiled, showing her fangs. "Then let it be known across the Dominion. This human and this vampire are bound together, not by ancient law, but by choice. Let anyone who challenges this union face the wrath of the Crimson Throne." The ceremony concluded with a traditional blood exchange, but this time it was different. Valeth did not take Jake's blood by force. Instead, he offered it freely, and she accepted it as a gift. In return, she gave him a single drop of her own blood, mixed with a medical compound that would help his body adapt to it without harm. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Valeth had ordered music to be played, human music that filled the hall with sound. Some vampires were disgusted, but others found themselves swaying to the rhythm despite themselves. Jake danced with his new wife, and even though she was cold to the touch, he felt warmth spreading through his chest. She was learning. They both were. 3 months later, Valeth made her first official announcement as a married princess. Standing before the Grand Council of the Sanguine Dominion, with Jake at her side, she declared a new law. Humans within Dominion space would have rights. They could own property. They could refuse to give blood. They could live as free citizens instead of cattle. The council erupted in anger, but Valeth stood firm. And when they tried to overrule her, Jake presented them with something that shocked them into silence. Data. Hard evidence that showed voluntary blood donation programs were more efficient than forced harvesting. Testimonials from human colonies willing to work with the Dominion if treated fairly. Economic projections showing that partnership would strengthen the empire rather than weaken it. "You can cling to the old ways and watch your species die," Jake said calmly. "Or you can adapt and survive. The choice is yours." The council voted to accept the new laws, though many did so reluctantly. News of the changes spread quickly through the galaxy. At first, other species were skeptical. But as human volunteers began arriving at Dominion medical centers, offering their blood in exchange for payment and protection, things began to shift. 6 months after the wedding, Valeth told Jake that she was pregnant. The news was met with both excitement and fear. No one knew what a human-vampire hybrid would be like. Medical staff monitored her constantly, worried about complications. But when their daughter was born, she was perfect. She had her mother's red eyes and her father's worn smile. Her skin was pale, but had a healthy flush to it. She could survive in both daylight and darkness. She had vampire strength, but human adaptability. They named her Lyra, after a constellation that was visible from both Earth and the Dominion homeworld. Jake stood in the nursery, holding his daughter and looking out at the stars. A year ago, he had been a simple cargo hauler, worried about fuel costs and delivery schedules. Now, he was the husband of a princess, the father of a hybrid child, and apparently some kind of ambassador for human-vampire relations. Valeth came up behind him and wrapped her arms around them both. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how strange life is. A year ago, you pointed at me in a fuel depot and declared me your husband. I thought my life was over. And now? Now I think maybe it was just beginning." Valeth rested her chin on his shoulder, and they stood together, watching their daughter sleep. Outside the window, the first human-vampire colony was under construction on a planet that had once been a battlefield. It was a small start, but it was something. The Sanguine Dominion was changing, slowly and painfully, like a creature emerging from a long hibernation. There would be resistance. There would be setbacks. Some vampires would never accept humans as equals, and some humans would never forgive the centuries of oppression. But Jake and Valeth had proven that change was possible. They had shown that even the most unlikely partnership could work if both sides chose respect over domination, understanding over tradition, and love over fear. Little Lyra stirred in Jake's arms, opening her red eyes to look up at her parents. She smiled, showing tiny fangs, and Jake felt his heart swell with hope. "Your daughter is going to change the galaxy," Valeth said softly. "Our daughter," Jake corrected. "And yeah, I think she will." In the distance, a human transport ship was arriving at the colony, carrying families who had volunteered to be part of this new experiment. They were scared, but hopeful, willing to take a chance on a better future. Jake thought about the moment he had been pointed at and claimed, how terrified and angry he had been. He thought about everything that had happened since then, all the fear and pain and struggle. And he thought about standing here now, with a wife who loved him, and a daughter who represented hope for two species. Getting pointed at by an alien vampire princess and declared her husband had been the strangest, most terrifying thing that had ever happened to him. It had also been the best. As Lyra fell back asleep, safe and warm between her parents, Jake smiled. The future was uncertain and probably full of challenges, but they would face it together. Human and vampire, chaos and order, emotion and logic. Together they would build something new. Together they would show the galaxy that even the most impossible partnerships could work. And it all started because one princess had the courage to point at one human and say, "He is mine." And one human had the courage to say back, "Only if I am also yours."